Plan on flying? In order to board domestic flights, your driver's license or state-issued ID must be a real ID. Learn how to get your real ID today at tsa.gov/realid or visit your local DMV.
You're listening to Reverie True Crime, your gateway to the darkest corners of human nature, where we expose the hidden truths of human depravity. These harrowing stories serve as a sobering reminder to keep our senses keen and our awareness sharp, for predators lurk in unexpected places, patiently waiting and observing. Join us as we unravel mysteries, explore motives, and seek justice for victims as we bring awareness to these cases. Listener discretion is advised.
Hello and welcome to Reverie True Crime. I'm your host, Paige. One moment, a teenage girl was living her life, a bit rebelliously like any other teenager in Greenville, Texas. The next, she was gone, leaving behind a family desperate for answers and a small town full of questions. Join me as we take a closer look at her story. Let's get started. Sarah Elizabeth Kinslow was born on June 14, 1986, to Louise and John Kinslow in Greenville, Texas. She was the youngest girl in the family, having at least 4 siblings. On the morning of May 1, 2001, 14-year-old Sarah was dropped off by her dad, John, at Greenville Middle School. She was dressed in a colorful t-shirt, a teal zip-up jacket, baggy blue jeans, and blue and gray sneakers. Around her neck, she wore a silver necklace with a pendant that spelled rock, and on her wrist was a watch with a pink Minnie Mouse face. But Sarah never stepped foot inside the school that day. Sarah had told her friends that she planned to skip school and meet them at East Mount Cemetery that morning. But when her friends arrived, Sarah never showed up. Supposedly, no one saw her after that. Her parents were made aware that their daughter hadn't been to any of her classes, and the panic started to set in. Louise and John quickly began making missing flyers for their daughter to hand out to people and put in store windows. They went into one store where a clerk said that they could hang their missing flyer. As they were doing that, a customer in the store, who was a total stranger, said to Sarah's parents that he didn't know why they were even bothering to look for her, because he heard that she didn't want to be found. Louise's immediate reaction was to question why he would say something like that to parents whose teenager is missing. Regardless of whether she ran away or not, she was still a vulnerable child, and her parents not only wanted to find her, but also to know more than anything that she was safe. They went everywhere in Quinlan, a small town nearby where she would hang out, and the surrounding areas to hang flyers in restaurants, gas stations, and anywhere that would allow it. However, when Louise and John would go by those places in Quinlan only a few days later, all the flyers would be gone. Louise and John said Quinlan is not the safest town, and hard drugs have really impacted that area and its residents heavily. Sarah's little brother Matt was only 11 years old when she disappeared. He told everyone that he spotted her soon after she went missing. She was at some point suspected to be staying on a street nearby in a storage unit behind a friend's house. It's not clear when her parents found out that she might have been staying there. Matt said that he saw his sister walking down that street, which is near the school. He saw her carrying a paper bag, which she might have been using to carry clothes that she borrowed from her friends, and he yelled her name. During this interaction, Sarah told him to go away and leave her alone. She was walking towards a pickup truck and hopped inside. That was the last time that Matt would ever see his sister again. Well, sort of. We'll get into that in just a few moments. Around 3:30 in the afternoon, the day that she didn't show up to school, a witness reported seeing Sarah inside an older model light blue Ford truck, driven by a man in his 30s with dark brown hair and a pencil mustache. Sarah didn't appear distressed, and she wasn't trying to escape. Police eventually brought canines to the school, and Sarah's scent was traced to a location 2 blocks away, where it abruptly ended in the middle of the street, as if she had gotten into a vehicle. Matt was only 11, so everyone was a little skeptical when he said he saw his sister, but it lined up with where the canines eventually lost her scent. I'm going to read a letter that Matt wrote to George Hale of 88.9 KETR in January of 2018. Matt was in prison at the time, and we'll get into why soon. George had interviewed Louise and John in 2018, and he and Matt were writing back and forth to each other. In this letter, Matt speaks about the time he saw his sister. There is a part of the letter that I haven't figured out who he's referring to, but maybe one of you will. George: Hey, what's going on, man? I hope you had a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. My Christmas wasn't all that, just another day. That makes the 7th I've been away from my family, and should be the last. No worries on reimbursing me for the stamps. I only stay broke because I eat up all of my money. Sometimes I sell some of my drawings for $20 to $50, depending on what it is. The only problem is, I'm slow at drawing because I have a lot of other stuff going on, and as a result, I'm occasionally broke between projects. I've had a good run these last few months with the holidays. I don't know why that guy would say that kind of stuff, knowing he isn't telling the truth. Maybe he gets some kind of satisfaction from it. Your guess is as good as mine. I learned a long time ago to not get my hopes up. Maybe I can learn something that will help. I plan on doing some of my own investigating. It doesn't seem like the police are interested in my sister's case anymore. Maybe if she would have been one of their kids, they would have found something out by now. At first, I don't think the police believed me since I was just a kid. Then they brought out the canines and picked up her scent. All of a sudden, they believed me. Go figure. Well, I'm gonna close this letter for now so I can get it in the mail. I hope things are going good for you. Take care. Matt. P.S. Any information you're willing to share would be a big help. There was one pretty obvious lead to follow first. She had been seeing 18-year-old Curtis Wayne Bell, a relationship that her parents highly disapproved of. Just 1 week after Sarah disappeared, Curtis was arrested and charged with aggravated sexual assault of a child. No, not Sarah, but another child who was 16. Sarah had written in her diary about her love for Curtis and her desire to run away with him, even mentioning that they might run to Mexico if her parents didn't approve of their relationship. He admitted they had discussed running away, but claimed that it was never serious. Despite her romantic thoughts, Sarah had not taken any extra clothes, her toothbrush, or even her purse. It was as if she had left, maybe expecting to go back home later on. Curtis and Sarah were caught together a day or two later at a gas station. CCTV footage showed Curtis and Sarah, or their lookalikes, entering and leaving. His story about that video would change at least twice. first, he said the male in the video was him, but it wasn't Sarah with him. It was supposedly a girl named Michelle. But Louise knew that was not true. As she explained to George Hale in their interview, there are things about your child that you just know. For example, Louise said Sarah took long strides and swayed her arms when she walked. Plus, she said she obviously knows what her daughter looks like, no matter how she tried to change her appearance by chopping off her hair and dyeing it brown. So, when a couple of months went by, she asked Curtis again about the footage. That time, he claimed it wasn't him on the video at all. When Louise was shown the video, the police officer with her told her that it was Curtis, at least in his opinion, and asked what she thought. She said she honestly couldn't be 100% sure that it was him, even though she thought it was, but she knew that was Sarah without a doubt. The police officer also walked away after analyzing the video, still confident that the guy in the footage was Curtis. Louise wanted the police to go to the gas station and ask the people who were on duty during the time Sarah was seen on the video so they could pick the male in the video out of a photo lineup. She told law enforcement that she could get a picture of Curtis and some other guys and have those employees look at them. However, the police wouldn't agree to it. According to Louise, one of the reasons they gave was that it would be too expensive, which didn't make any sense. Louise did end up showing the employees a photo of Sarah taken before she went missing, and an altered photo of what Sarah would look like with shorter brown hair. The employees immediately said yes, that was definitely the girl with the brown hair. Louise already knew it, but having that confirmation likely helps not just with the investigation, but I'm sure it can make you feel better to hear it from the people who were there, too. Whenever Louise would go to confront Curtis at his home, his dad would tell her to stop harassing his son, that he did not have anything to do with Sarah's disappearance, and he would make her leave. Several of Sarah's friends were questioned extensively, and some failed polygraph tests. But there were no concrete answers, and they were never polygraph tested or investigated again. Friends of Sarah's would be seen wearing jewelry or clothes of hers, but as a lot of teenage girlfriends do, they often swapped clothes, purses, jewelry, and things like that. But it made Louise wonder if her daughter was maybe hiding out at one of their houses. When she would ask Sarah's friends where they got those certain items, they would tell her that it was something Sarah let them borrow before she went missing. As a mother, her mind was always reeling, and I'm sure it must have been so difficult to believe that her friends would never lie for her, especially if they knew she was hiding away somewhere. Louise mentioned that her friends might have felt like they were quote-unquote protecting Sarah from her, but she didn't understand why they thought that. Her friends also claimed Sarah would have bruises often, but the Kinslows said that simply wasn't true. I started to wonder what might have been going on with Sarah that she chose to turn to drugs at 14 years old, or maybe even a little younger. What problems might she have had that she possibly turned to substances as an escape or coping mechanism? At first, I thought since they lived so close to Quinlan, with its reputation, that the issue could have been started by peer pressure. Louise said that Sarah was going through a rebellious phase in her life, and the likelihood of her running away seemed to be chalked up to a teenager simply defying the rules that she disliked. However, I do have a duty to be honest and forthright. From my findings, there have been public allegations of sexual abuse, heavy drug use, and violence in the home, according to a family member. I have struggled with whether or not to expand on that, because it's always important and necessary to be sensitive to the ones left behind to pick up the pieces, who my heart does deeply ache for if they didn't do any harm to the victim, while also being a voice for those who, in this case, likely can no longer speak their side. So I'll leave that there for you to think about as we move on. Louise went to the police department and told them she suspected Sarah was staying in Quinlan with Curtis and that he was selling drugs out of his house. She advised them to put up cameras in the area if they wanted to catch drug dealers, users, and hopefully find her daughter all at the same time. But law enforcement claimed it would cost too much to do all of that, which is also what they said about the photo lineup that Louise wanted to do, because it costs money, apparently, to show people's pictures to the employees at the gas station, even though she said police had just recently used Curtis in a photo lineup for another crime. Law enforcement ultimately said no. So Louise rightfully pointed out when police said it would cost too much to set up just one camera in that area, that the price of a camera was more important than a human being. The police would then say that people on drugs would simply rip the cameras down, and basically told the Kinslows that it was pointless to even try it. Louise told them that she obviously didn't mean for them to put the camera in a place that was noticeable or reachable, but it seemed like nothing she said really mattered. A lot of issues and dead ends the Kinslows experienced were the same as we hear in so many cases. Lazy law enforcement who don't seem to want to do the actual work, and not wanting to spend any money on search efforts or anything else for that matter. These are things we hear far too often about police departments all over America, especially in small towns, and more commonly when it comes to possible runaways, people who have addictions, sex workers, or those who have had very hard lives. They don't get the same treatment most of the time. Some police don't seem to value their lives as much in a lot of cases, as we know. Sarah's case had no media attention, unlike many other missing girls at the time who were on nationwide news every day. They felt like nobody really cared about their daughter or what they were going through as a family. Curtis did get called in for a polygraph test. He failed it. Supposedly, it was due to him sneezing while answering if he knew where Sarah was. They refused to test him again, and that was that. About a month after Sarah went missing, her older sister Jill got married, a wedding that had been planned for at least 9 months. And after a little hesitation, everyone decided the wedding would go on. Sarah was supposed to be one of the bridesmaids and even had a dress already. Her mother had a hard time processing that one of her daughters was in front of her eyes saying her wedding vows, while not knowing if she would see her youngest daughter ever again. Louise was also dealing with the pain that 11-year-old Matt was experiencing. He was having a really rough time soaking it all in and slowly realizing that his big sister might not ever come back home. As happy as Louise was for her eldest daughter getting married, she was devastated by everything else going on. Sarah also has another big sister who is only a few years older than her, named Rebecca. And to Sarah, she was the coolest big sister. She would give her advice and would also allegedly tell Sarah where to meet people and make friends who would eventually lead her down a very rocky path. It completely wrecked Rebecca when Sarah disappeared, too. The eldest sister, Jill, who had just gotten hitched, had moved out of the Kinslow household a long time ago. She started a life of her own and wasn't as connected with Sarah as those who still lived at home. In the months and years that followed, several possible sightings gave the Kinslow family fleeting hope. One neighbor of the Kinslows reported seeing Sarah in a car in Quinlan on Christmas Day 2001. Without a doubt, they said they knew it was Sarah behind them in a car driven by a man when they were stopped at a red light. They didn't tell Sarah's parents right away. They eventually did report it to the police and told them the make and model of the car that she was in. Shortly after, authorities claimed they had a phone interview with the male driver after tracking him down. It took them a while to figure out who the car actually belonged to because it had changed hands several times. They finally found that it was a man from Princeton, Texas, and police claimed that they could, quote, tell just by the phone interview that he didn't know Sarah and it wasn't Sarah in the car. The neighbors still don't have any doubt that it was the Kinslow's daughter in that car. As soon as the family offered a reward for tips that could lead to Sarah, the phone started ringing. So many people made things up in hopes of getting the money. One woman called Louise and said she lived right next door to Sarah, even having the audacity to send Louise a picture of this person who obviously wasn't Sarah and shared no similarities whatsoever. There were a lot of calls like that, thinking they would get an easy payday, preying on a family, fighting for help and answers. There were, however, a lot of people calling who genuinely believed they saw Sarah. All the girls who police were able to track down from those calls were understandably mistaken for Sarah because they actually had similar hair and or facial features. So there were people genuinely trying to help, and thankfully, almost every tip that came in was followed up on. Around late 2001 or 2002, there was a party in Quinlan where a girl named Sarah died from an overdose. Louise and John quickly met with the police, ready to find out if it could be their daughter. But it wasn't their Sarah. The Kinslows also begged law enforcement to look in the woods around Lake Tawakoni and in the lake itself. One search team wanted $30,000 to go out there, but Louise and John didn't have the money to do that. Lake Tawakoni is one place her parents believe if something bad happened to Sarah and her body was disposed of, it could be where she was. It is also believed there are other bodies and remains in that lake. Louise went out and bought a pair of binoculars. She had a pair already, but these were an upgrade. There were a few instances that she put them to good use. She would sit near Curtis's place and watch as all kinds of people would come and go through all hours of the day and night, likely buying, selling, and using drugs. The times that she went out there, putting herself in potential danger to do her own surveillancing that the police wouldn't, she never saw her little girl. In 2002, it was a very chilly January day when Louise went to Princeton, Texas. She wanted to find out a little bit more about this guy who was reported by the neighbors to be driving with Sarah in the car. It just so happens his uncle owned a wrecking yard, so Louise used her brand new binoculars to scan the area for signs of their daughter. but yet again, no luck. Louise did get a good look at the car her daughter might have been in only less than a week before. Each house she passed, she hoped she would happen to spot her daughter around one of them. Sadly, she did not. Sarah's parents talked to different people all around Princeton, showing them pictures of Sarah, and some of them said they had definitely seen her before. So the Kinslows found out a little bit more and went to this restaurant where they were told the car owner's mother worked. They just wanted to talk to her and maybe find something out that would be helpful to them. Right away, the woman shut down. She did not want to talk to them about it, claiming that she didn't know anything about Sarah. A possibility that the Kinslows had thought about was that the neighbors, who reportedly saw her on Christmas Day, since they were in Quinlan, could have actually been with Sarah and Curtis that day to use drugs somewhere. Maybe at Curtis's or maybe somewhere else. They could be wrong, but either way, at least they decided to come forward and rid their conscience of that and do the right thing. Unfortunately, it was only another lead that left more questions that no one would help them find answers to. The next thing to happen would be an anonymous note appearing in the Kinslows' mailbox. The message suggested they talk to a girl named Lisa Ann, who might have answers. So Louise talked to her, and Lisa said that she was friends with Sarah, but that she had no idea what happened to her. Soon after that, a man named James reached out to Louise via MySpace to explain he was the one who sent the anonymous letter and why he sent it. James told her that Lisa Ann absolutely told his wife, Amber, who was one of Sarah's best friends, that Sarah had been with Curtis and she overdosed. Then Curtis and Amber's ex, Nash Waldrop, freaked out and buried her body in the woods. James told Louise that Amber felt so bad for not telling her, but she felt like, since Nash was her ex, that Louise might put some kind of blame on her or lash out. She wasn't sure how Louise would react, so she was scared to tell her what Lisa Ann said. James felt that he should step up and let the Kinslows know and explain what Amber was going through as she struggled with how to break the news to them. She couldn't be 100% certain that what Lisa Ann told her was the truth, but it was still difficult for her to navigate the fear of how, when, and if she should tell Louise, while also trying to wrap her mind around what happened to her best friend at the same time. Louise said that she knew Sarah had been doing drugs with Curtis, and he had also been arrested for drugs in the past. So what Lisa Ann said could have been true. Louise and John were able to get in touch with a search team out of Houston, Texas called EquiSearch. They were brought up to speed on what was happening and offered Lisa Ann $1,000 for any information that she would be willing to tell them. EquiSearch allegedly bolted out of town back to Houston shortly after and never returned a single call from the Kinslow family. They aren't sure if Lisa was given any of the money or if she even told them anything at all. John also pointed out that small-town politics definitely played a role in how things were unfolding throughout their search for Sarah. Law enforcement may have told EquiSearch to get out of town and not get involved. The Kinslows can only speculate on reasons why they left town without communicating with them and why they never returned their calls. One of Louise and John's older sons, Jerry, went to prison in the 1990s and was still locked up when Sarah had gone missing. Jerry would often talk to people who were from the Quinlan area, and one person told him that Curtis and other guys were known to get together to drug girls and then sexually assault them, which sounded legit due to Curtis's charges of sexually assaulting another teenage girl right after Sarah disappeared. Curtis's mother was clearly worried about the age gap between Sarah and her son, and the possibility of him getting in more trouble for potentially playing a role in Sarah's disappearance or death. His mother would often call Louise in attempts to drain her of more information about what was going on with Sarah's case, if they'd heard anything else, or if Curtis had been brought back up at all. They felt that she was only reaching out, acting concerned, and asking questions because she was trying to see if Louise would say anything so she could figure out how to best shield her son, maybe come up with lies if she felt she needed to. Louise did say that his mom was nice and part of her had good intentions, but of course, she also knew that she had her own reasons for wanting to know if her son had been mentioned anymore. Not long after talking to Curtis's mother, his aunt, his mother's sister Jenny, added Louise to MySpace and was asking questions. She told Louise that Curtis has a brother named Michael who lives in Waco and wondered if they had thought about looking into him. Was this a question asked out of genuine worry for Sarah, or did she just want to know if Michael was being mentioned in Sarah's case as well? Louise believed that at the root of it all the contact from his mom and his aunt was only for as much information as they could get in order to do what they felt they needed to for Curtis's sake, which likely would entail anything other than holding him accountable if he was guilty of anything. His aunt would say that she and her sister didn't get along and all these other things against Curtis's mom, possibly a tactic to lower Louise's guard, wanting to make her believe that she was a safe person to talk to. Eventually, all of those communications would stop once they didn't get any answers. In early 2004, there were reports of Sarah possibly being seen in many places all over Oregon. There was also a sighting in British Columbia, Canada, with speculation that Sarah was trying to lay low and maybe begin a new life. But none of these sightings were ever confirmed. In 2009, Curtis pleaded guilty to the sexual assault charges and served a short sentence. His probation was later revoked in 2012, resulting in a 9-year prison sentence. But despite his connection to Sarah, Curtis has always denied knowing anything about her whereabouts. When he was sent to prison for sexually assaulting the 16-year-old, it came out that he had taken that child to his grandfather's property. So the Kinslows decided to just see what the property looked like. They went online and pulled up a satellite view of the back of the property. Louise pointed out what looked like a triangular lump in the ground, and she couldn't help but think that a body could easily be buried there. It immediately struck them as a very suspicious spot. The grandparents had passed away, but Curtis's parents had taken over the place. They eventually sold it to another man, and the Kinslows weren't sure if the parents or the other man owned the property when cadaver dogs were taken there to search around. Unfortunately, the triangular part that Louise had talked about had piles and piles of limbs, debris, odds and ends, all these discarded items of junk stacked up on top of it and around it. That spot wasn't a small one either. It seemed to Louise to likely be 15 by 15 feet, but there was no way to get close to the actual piece of ground due to the amount of crap piled on and around it. Nothing was detected by the dogs during the search. A few years later, Matt believed he saw his sister. He was at a motel, hanging out and using drugs, which had consumed his life by that point. He believed he saw a man at the motel who was dragging his sister around. He began beating and kicking down doors at the motel, his head likely spinning from whatever substances he was indulging in, whipping out a knife to defend himself and Sarah if he could find her. In his mind, he was desperately trying to save her. The cops were called, and when they arrived, he was yelling belligerently at them to go find her because he knew she was there. He got so angry and frustrated at the police that he assaulted the officer. Matt also still had the knife in his hand, but he didn't attempt to use it on the officer. He did hit him, though, which led to a tussle and a sentence of 10 years in prison. He was supposed to get out of prison in 2019 if he had made parole, but I couldn't find any information about whether he had or not. This is a letter he wrote to George Hale in July of 2017 about the incident. Mr. Hale, hey, how's it going? Sorry it took so long for me to respond to your letter, but here I am. My mom has told me a little about Carrie Parker. Side note, she was another girl that went missing, and they thought that she could be in Lake Tawakoni. She also told me about the guy who, quote-unquote, found a body in the woods by Curtis's grandparents. Since he wasn't able to take anyone to this body, I figured he's probably just lying. If he did actually see a body, why tell you and not the police first? And why wait so long to say something? As for your question about what happened to get me in prison, it was behind drugs. I still don't remember what all happened that day. I was shooting up meth, and I did too much and blacked out. When I came back around, I was so high, I was seeing things that weren't really there. Well, I thought I saw my sister Sarah. I know that sounds crazy since at that point she had been missing for 10 years, but you have to understand, I was way out of my head. Anyway, one moment I see Sarah, and the next she goes into a motel room. So I kick the door in, and no one's in the room. I think I did that 2 or 3 times before the police showed up. At some point, I pulled out my knife. The police were yelling at me to drop it. I said the only way I was going to drop it was if they shot me. I told you I was tripping. I'm very glad that didn't happen. Eventually, one of the police officers managed to get close enough to spray me with mace, and I started trying to fight him. Then I got taken down by 2 more police officers, and it was pretty much over with after that. It sucks how it all happened, but it was definitely a positive thing for me in the long run. It got me off drugs, and I don't have a desire for that stuff at all anymore. I feel like I've matured a lot, and I think once I'm released, I'll be able to be more responsible. Anyway, that's what happened. I apologize if I wasn't very helpful on the other subject. I plan on doing some of my own investigating when I get out. Maybe I'll be more helpful then. I can't call you because you would have to set up a phone account, and I think it would cost too much. But anytime you write, I will write back. I look forward to hearing from you if you have any more questions. Take care. Matt Kinslow. P.S. What days and times does your radio show come on? Police eventually deduced that Sarah more than likely left voluntarily and wasn't kidnapped or off somewhere living a new life, but her family and close friends didn't think she would have left without taking any of her things. In the interview with George Hale, Louise opened up about how she and Sarah had a big, blown-up argument when she came in late for curfew one night. Sarah was livid. She took off to her room, shoving clothes into a backpack, and told her mom she was leaving. Louise put her foot down and told her that she wasn't going anywhere, but Sarah spouted back, "You just wait. I will leave." It made the hair on the back of her mother's neck stand up, because in her heart of hearts, she said she knew her little girl meant it. She said that's what ended up happening, that Sarah ran away with Curtis. At least, that was her feeling and opinion at the time. Sarah's mother has lived with all this uncertainty and all of these what-ifs for over 2 decades. She believes the worst happened, but still holds on to the hope of finding answers. Every year on the anniversary of Sarah's disappearance, the family releases balloons into the sky, a very melancholy tribute to a daughter whose story remains unfinished to this day. Sarah Kinslow would be 38 years old today. The Charlie Project notes that she had distinctive features, including crooked front teeth, a small mole near her collarbone, and multiple piercings in her ears, and a tattoo of the letter I on the inside of her ankle. If there's a chance that she's still alive, she obviously may look completely different now, but her loved ones have never stopped searching for proof of what actually happened. I'll have the age progression photos on all of the podcast's social media, Instagram, BlueSky, Tumblr, the Facebook page, X, etc., for you to look at. My hope is that maybe her pictures will jog someone's memory, or someone will come forward anonymously to tell something they just remembered. Or if the fact is that she isn't with us anymore, they might remember hearing where her body could be. Anything to help a family begin to get closure. If you have any information about Sarah's case at all, please contact the Greenville Police Department at 903-457-2900. The truth is still out there, but will anyone be brave enough to finally tell it? Thank you so much for listening to this episode, and tune in next week for a brand new one. Until then, stay safe and take care.
Thank you for listening to this episode. As we close out, let us not forget awareness is our greatest defense. In a world that can be dark and grim, vigilance is our beacon of hope. When it comes to the cases we have explored together that have remained unsolved, if you happen to hold a piece of the puzzle, dare to step forward. As author Lois McMaster Bujold once said, "The dead cannot cry out for justice. It is a duty of the living to do so for them." Until we reconvene, my friends, stay vigilant and stay informed.